Welcome to City of Asylum. City of Asylum builds a just community by protecting and celebrating freedom of creative expression. We provide sanctuary to endangered writers and artists so that they can continue to create and their voices are not silenced. We offer a broad range of free literary, arts, and humanities programs in community setting to build social equity through cultural exchange. We are the U.S. headquarters of the International Cities of Refuge Network. ICORN is based in Norway and is an independent organization of cities and regions. They offer shelter to writers and artists at risk, advancing freedom of expression, defending democratic values, and promoting international solidarity. Now you will hear the story of an ICORN artist.
Welcome, Pittsburgh. My name is Ali Ibrahim. I'm journalist and writer and documentary filmmaker. I'm living in the Sweden, in the Region Shopping Land. I'm taking the scholarship in the ICORN. Now I complete a new project because I'm finished the first project, the documentary film. This is film One Day in Aleppo, a short documentary about how people live under siege inside Aleppo. And we're screening world premiere in this film in the Maison Doril in Switzerland, and I'm taking the prize and winner the jury prize in the short film. The freedom expression, this is life, because when you stay any place in the world and you can't speak or you can't do everything, this is not life. The freedom speech, this is life. Only one sequence, the freedom expression, life. The freedom speech, life, only. You can't do everything if you can't speak freedom, if you can't take it a video, or if you can't making a film free. So the freedom speech, life. Enjoy the show.
Hello. Good evening. Welcome. My name is Darren Lee, and I am the Director of Public Programming here at City of Asylum. It's such a joy to see you here all tonight. As you saw in the video, City of Asylum started as a sanctuary program for writers who are persecuted for their work and seeking asylum in America. These writers wanted to share their stories, share their work with the Pittsburgh community. And so our organization has grown and grown and grown. And 20 years after the fact, we have this beautiful venue and bookstore and restaurant where we can all come together and hear stories. I hope some stories are stories that are aspects of your life that maybe you don't see represented that much. And I hope that some stories are stories that you are new to you and new to me, and we can all learn from. This evening, we are so happy to have Christopher Rivas here presenting his book, Brown Enough. Christopher is an actor, author, podcaster, playwright, and storyteller. His book, Brown Enough, is part memoir, part social commentary, and we'll hear a few of the issues here tonight. He also hosts a podcast called Brown Enough, where he further explores some of the themes of the book. His play, The Real James Bond Was Dominican, is currently being produced by our partners for this program, City Theater and DNA Works. And if you head over to City Theater in January and February, you'll be able to see the play in action. Chris will be in conversation with Betty Cruz. Betty is the president and CEO of the World Affairs Council, and she has spent over 20 years in community outreach and program management. She ran citywide initiatives for Mayor Bill Peduto, and she's also fluent in Spanish, Portuguese, and English. So please join me in welcoming to our stage Betty and Chris.
Hi, y'all. Hi, y'all. Yeah, it's on. Yeah, hi, y'all. Hello.
Hello. How's everyone tonight? Good. Great to be here with you. Looking forward to digging into Chris's story in Brown Enough. And Chris, it's a joy to be here with you tonight. And we got to chat a little bit beforehand and got to know you just a little bit. And I have to start by level setting and saying that I'm a little bit biased getting into this story because I felt like I read and saw so much of myself in your words as a Latina, daughter of Cuban immigrants. Your story, its beauty, its complexity, your parents, your Dominican dad, your Colombiana mom, the silly things that you encountered, the people, let's call it that people say and perceive, reminded me of the time that I was asked, do you speak Cuban? I'm like, no ma'am. You made reference, and I'm looking forward to unpacking all of that, and also unpacking how you grappled with the internalized and intergenerational racism and dynamics that are also present deeply in your story and in your book, Brown Enough. So we're gonna get into both of these. Brown Enough and the real James Bond was Dominican as we move through the conversation. One part of your story, though, with all of the similarities that I was expecting in what I see in you, one part that I wasn't expecting that we have in common that I didn't mention to you earlier is that we both spent some time silent retreating in Barre, Massachusetts. I'm like, what? And our stories are a little bit different there. You arrived to meditation. I think there's a girlfriend and a lie and some other bits to it, but I'm also looking forward to hearing about that. I want to take a moment to thank our audience, all of you who are here, all who are joining online at Alphabet City. We'll move through some questions that I have for Chris. He's going to read a little bit from the book as well, and then we'll turn to questions from the audience. So please start thinking of those. Now let's begin with the place where it all started for you in that 164-unit building on 64th and Queens. The building even has its own chapter in the book. And I'd love to just get us going, Chris, with if you can read for us first couple of pages. Page 23.
Yeah, so this chapter is called 10217 64th Road. That's the building I grew up in. My dad was the superintendent, and he had a big fat key ring with every single key in the building. That building was my family, the home where I watched my father throw a man through the front glass window because he was hurting one of the women in the building. He was defending his family, my family, our family, not by blood, but by home, by spirit. And the rest of the 160 families in the building backed him up immediately because that's what you do for family. You pray together when the man downstairs dies unexpectedly, or when the family in 2G needs you to make sure they don't open the door for their heroin addict son. You fight across the hallway when you want quiet. You fight very loudly, and then you gossip about it the next day with everybody. But also, you connect tables across hallways, stacking tables like a snake that make it out the front door, connecting into someone else's apartment, so that 60 people can share a Thanksgiving dinner, one that starts in one apartment for the first course, moves to a couple other apartments for the second, and then another for dessert. Yes, at my godfather's. In this building, my entire extended family had thin walls, big-ass mouths, and even bigger hearts.
Thank you. Yes. That's beautiful, and I really love the way you weave in culture, the different families, how that building itself was part of the ancestor. It's its own character because it's home to all of these families that are both chosen family and birth family. And within that chosen family, you speak to the power of, yes, we can love our neighbor, even amidst sometimes chaos and loudness and beauty and all of this. You throughout the book, you bring in the term Latinidad. And you also introduced me to a term called bodies of culture. And you're weaving that in with your experiences. It comes up both in the parts of culture that you've embraced, and and the other parts, especially when contrasted with whiteness, and the ones that have caused pain. So I'm wondering if you can help to ground us on what you mean by these terms. What does Latinidad mean to you? What is bodies of culture?
Yeah, so Latinidad to me, in general, Latinos have a issue going on right now. Are we Latine, Latinx, Latino, Latina? I don't think a single term could ever make anyone happy. Right? You're looking for one term that can possibly contain 26 different nationalities, hips, colors, flavors, food, styles. In general, I don't think there's a box that can contain anyone in this room. And so Latinidad was the term that I could feel comfortable with containing the multitudes. And a lot of that actually comes from my background in theater. I did a play called DJ Latinidad, which was 12 short plays written by different people of the diaspora, and it was beautiful, and it was everything from an elder to a 5-year-old who wrote one of the plays, and so that's the term that has sort of helped me understand my Latinidad, my Dominicanness, my Colombianness, my New Yorkness, my Queensness. And as far as bodies of culture, that's a term that comes from someone named Resma Menachem. Resma might have gotten it from somewhere else, but I heard it Resma say it first. And the way I have come to understand it is whiteness doesn't want our color, it wants our culture. That's what it's always wanted, to commodify culture, to make money off of culture, to claim culture. And so bodies of culture is a sort of a binding word that I think is sort of everyone under the gaze of whiteness.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting because you at different points in the book, you also talk about labels. Literally, you talk about like label making and the joys in the physical act of label making. And I think about also
you ever had a label maker? It's so fun. It's amazing. It just prints everything you write.
And you were going to town with that label maker.
I labeled a spoon. I was like, this is my cereal spoon.
And then on the other side of it, of how we lean into labels as adults, and how that can be both comforting but problematic, right? And how we can find safety in those labels, but also it can create further division. It was making me think of how in speaking to the binary. Oftentimes when we're talking about race and how that might focus on black and white, how you might know that you have this place, and there can be safety in that sense of self of looking at things through this binary, but it's in that liminal space, it's in that in-between that's messy but real, where there's this actual beauty and depth and understanding.
Yeah, I think that's why that's why I chose this word brown. Like it's this, I grew up in Queens. You're gonna hear me say Queens a lot in my life because it is such a powerful place, y'all. It's home to 138 different spoken languages. I can maybe name 30. It is the most diverse place in the world, Queens, New York, and that's not like an exaggeration. It's the most diverse place in the world. So I literally grew up in what we call the melting pot, and I had friends from all over the world, and I didn't know that wasn't the norm. And yet we were even as young people trying to claim our difference. But I was like, nah, bro, like Afan, like my South Asian homie, like we the same, like we're in this thing together. My Jamaican friend over here. And so brownness felt like the term that blackness has always had, where blackness is like, yo, you're black, come here, I got you. And brownness hasn't had that. Especially amongst Latinos, they're like, you're Mexican, you're Cuban, you're Cuban. In Hollywood, if the Puerto Ricans get a show, then the Colombians are like, where's my TV show? There is a lot of this idea of zero sum. Like if you get a piece of the pie, then I don't eat today. And what I'm hoping to do by claiming brownness or body of culture, or anything that's a little more fluid, that's not just this or that, yes, no, right, wrong, but this middle fluid space is saying there's room for all of us to eat. You know, when we work in more of a collaborative way, we all eat.
Yeah, I love Latinidad also just sounds just more expansive, because I will say that for me it was weird when I moved out of Miami, and I always identified as Cuban. I was born in the States, but you know, my family's from Cuba, and that's what I identified as deeply a part of who I am. And it was when I left Miami, ironically for New York, that I learned about the term, you know, well, started being referred to as like Hispanic, and then Latina, and then person of color, identities and labels I never understood or identified as part of myself. And in the ways that that's unlocked some things for me, but then also helped me return. And I want to get into, there were two figures in your life. I want to get into the inspiration, the broader inspiration of Brownie Enough. But there were two figures that particularly jumped out to me that seemed to play an incredibly important role beyond family. Two men who have had a lot to say about the role of racism in our culture, communities, and our country. Your encounters with John Leguizamo and Ta-Nehisi Coates seemed to change your life. Seeing John on stage in Freak, someone you could identify with, who was transformational in charting your path, seeing him meant you could now see yourself. And in contrast, your quick but profound exchange with writer Ta-Nehisi Coates in an intimate gathering in downtown LA lit a different type of fire. And it reminded me of, in Spanish, we say, le echó leña al fuego. He added fuel to the fire. The fire was already in you. But when he said those three words to you, not in it, this seems to have revealed something deeper in you, and in response helped give birth to Brownie Enough. Curious, yes.
Yeah,
please.
I'll give some context.
Yeah.
I was at a gathering in downtown LA, kind of like this. Ta-Nehisi Coates, y'all know Ta-Nehisi Coates, has been referred to as our modern day James Baldwin. And it was Q&A time, like it will become Q&A time. And I raised my hand and I said, you know, as a young Dominican Colombian brown kid from Queens, he was speaking about black and white, which he does. I said, where does that put me in the conversation? And he said, not in it. And then they took the mic and they went, and I sat down and I couldn't sleep that night. And I thought, not in it. I'm not in it. My mom's not in it. My pops isn't it. Queens isn't in it. Like, my building isn't in it. Where am I? Where are we? And this book was really born that day of what does it mean to be in it? What does it mean to be in the conversation in a black and white world when you identify not so clearly in any one direction? You know, how do we use our voice and our bodies? How do we take action? How do we show up in our fullness when the world says you should try and, you know, especially in Latinidad culture, where if you can identify as white, you should try and push yourself towards whiteness, you know? And if you can identify as black, you should try and push yourself that way. And there are so many people in the middle who don't know where they stand. And so those were the three words, not in it. And so I went in search of what it means to be in it. Yeah.
Where do you see yourself in relation today with both of those figures, both of those moments? I mean, they happen.
Gratitude.
Yeah. Tremendous
Gratitude. Like, even in the book I say this, I do not think Coates was wrong. Or rude, or like, I think it was just like, that was an honest, genuine answer. We live in a black and white world. It's just easier for a lot of people's brains, like, to see he, she, or yes, no. Like, that's why I think fluidity is such a beautiful concept, because I'm telling you, it's like, some people are like, you can be two things. And I'm like, yo, you can be 40 things, sweetie. Like, you can be 50 things, right? We have multitudes in us. And so I have so much gratitude for him saying not in it, as I come to understand my own every day, my own in itness, my own value, my own worth, my own enoughness. Yeah.
Are there any other points of inspiration? You have these two figures, but maybe if you can bring a little bit to life and into the room, your dad, your mom, and how they help to inspire.
Yeah, I'm a little obsessed with my pops. We fight a lot, but I'm obsessed. You know, that's how it works. My father is a master manifester. He would never call it that. You know, he was he was vision boarding before anyone was vision boarding. You know, like before Martha Stewart ever made a vision board, my dad had everything he wanted to become in the basement. You know, like he had this board. And in the play that we're doing at City Theater next month, Real James Bond was Dominican. You know, a lot is about my father because I see my father a lot in this Dominican man James Bond is based on, which I can read a little from that, from Ruby Rosa. This chapter is The Real James Bond was Dominican, and there's an opening quote from James Baldwin that says, "Heroes, as far as I could see, were white, and not merely because of the movies, but because of the land in which I live, of which movies are simply a reflection." James Baldwin. I pop my head around the corner. The coast is clear. I do a fully executed tumble in a pair of tidy whities and socks. I land in a fighting stance. I'm fully strapped, Nerf gun in my right hand, Nerf pistol in my left, a Nerf grenade launcher slung over my back. I got a makeshift belt attached to my hip holding one more Nerf gun while a single shot Nerf is tucked into my socks. I do another tumble and fire into the distance, whispering into my invisible watch, "I'll be out in 6 flat." I check the perimeter for my target and then check my back for people sneaking up on me before firing again. My mom yells from the kitchen, "Coño muchacho, I swear to God, if this food gets cold, if I have to tell you one more time, I will break all your toys. Everything. I will break everything." I whisper again into my watch, "My bad. Bond is going to have to meet you at the drop-off point after dinner." "Everything," my mom shouts again from the kitchen, which is only 10 feet away from where I'm standing, but she's acting like I'm at a park across the street. I drop the guns. "Ma, okay, I heard you." "And put some clothes on," she adds, as I undo my improvised belt and head to my room, which is really just a partitioned part of our living room, but still it's mine. As a kid, my white friends were able to put themselves in any movie they wanted. They could fantasy cast their own biopic in a matter of minutes. They had endless choices of nearly identical celebrities and characters and stories that looked like and represented them. Their food, their faces, their hair, their families, their home, their Tuesday night dinners. As a 4'10" prepubescent Dominican kid with glasses, a big nose, and a curly-ass fro in Queens, New York, who did I have to choose from? About 3 actors and 3 storylines that were criminalized, hypersexualized, and mediocre at best. But I wasn't tough enough to be Danny Trejo, and I wasn't sexy enough to be Antonio Banderas. So what do? I chose James Bond. I mean, who wouldn't want to be Bond? He's chill, he's tough, everyone likes him, he does important work saving the world, and he gets mad honeys, all while rocking a ridiculous bespoke black tux. Bond was the homie. And even though I wasn't British, still not British, and I didn't look anything like Pierce Brosnan, still don't look like Pierce Brosnan, Bond seemed tangible. He was just a person, a cool dude, and maybe I could actually become him one day, just with a touch of Latin flair. Bond, Jaime Bond, bondissimo.
Yes. Something that you spoke to in the book that I don't think gets discussed enough is the privilege to be ordinary. Can you say more on what you mean about that, about, you know, characters that can get to play unremarkable stories and the beauty in everyday life?
Yeah, so my dream has always been to, y'all seen When Harry Met Sally? You know, like...
Only 20 times, 100.
White people have just been talking in movies forever. They just are people. They're not special because they're white. They're just people, you know? And you see that and you think they are worthy. And I didn't see that. Anytime I saw anything that represented me, it was the butt of the joke, the criminal, it had a purpose. And so this ordinariness, is actually not so ordinary when you're growing up and you're taking in these images where you're not seeing yourself. It actually becomes extraordinary. And so I was someone who watched a lot of television and a lot of movies, and I knew I loved this art form so much. And so I subconsciously built a little bit of self-hate in me. I think in order to be an actor, I have to look like them. I have to sound like them. I have to be like them, right? There weren't a lot of examples that said, be exactly who you are. And that is why seeing John Leguizamo on Broadway was so powerful, because it was a little piece of armor that said, be who you are. Don't change. Be who you are. And that's a hard thing, you know, in a place like Hollywood, where I've had managers, you know, tell me to cut my hair, get a nose job, change myself, because that world has been conditioned to show you a world looks a certain way when that's not how the world looks. And I feel very grateful to be here now, having eaten so much of those lies, and still returning to being myself and loving myself and taking up space on both film and television.
Here. Can you jump back into the chapter on the real James Bond was Dominican, page 158, and read that paragraph for us, please?
She really killed it with the post-it notes. Makes my job very easy. Thank you. I want to be James Bond, but I'm not Roger Moore or Daniel Craig. I'm Ruby Rosa. I'm a Dominican. I'm Colombian. I'm louder than the Brits. I'm like real loud, especially during a game of dominoes, especially at a party. My coffee is sweeter and blacker. My music has more rhythm, more drums, more hips. My food is spicier. My land more biodiverse. My people are salt air and sun-filled, not sun-shy. I love being brown. I think where and what I come from is beautiful, strong, fun, and yet in media and culture, I have no evidence that being brown is a good idea.
Now, Porfirio Rubirosa was strong and beautiful and many things. Can you tell us what surprised you the most as you were digging into his story?
Where to begin? So I, in college, got an article sent to me from Vanity Fair about a man named Porfirio Rubirosa, the Dominican man James Bond's based on. And I was flabbergasted, blown away. I called my dad. I said, yo, Pops, why didn't you tell me about this? He said, I didn't think it was a big deal. I said, you didn't think it was a big deal? I said, he was twice the richest man in the world. He did all this and this. He's like, yes, I don't think it's a big deal. And I went down the rabbit hole, you know, and I discovered a man who was everywhere. I mean, he was in Hitler's Germany and Fidel's Cuba and best friends with Sammy Davis Jr. and Frank Sinatra, and running guns for Meyer Lansky. And, you know, he was also and he was a race car driver in a Polo, and he flew B-52 bombers for fun. I mean, legit, most interesting man in the world type stuff. Also wildly problematic, as a partner and as a lover. And so he became this symbol of everything I wanted to be, and later everything I didn't want to be, everything I was afraid I was becoming. This is a man who in the 1940s was changing his body, you know, staying out of the sun, whitening his skin, getting a nose job, to be accepted, to be loved by who, right? And I just saw so much of myself in this person. People in college started calling me Ruby. I won a teddy bear at a fair. I named it Ruby. You know, and it really took over my life. Yeah.
One more excerpt, please. Page 164.
Okay, before I read it, I have to read you. I have to do this gesture for you. A friend of mine called me out on it during a coffee date. Why do you always do that thing with your nose? I replied, it's just a habit. It's just a thing I picked up along the way. Now, what I could have said was, it's because I've been brainwashed. It's fear and trauma that is instilled deep within me. It is an ancient wound, a separation that secretly, not so secretly, makes me wish and need to look more like you. I remember all the novelas my grandmother used to watch when we were young. How any time a character came on who looked like my dark-skinned grandmother, they were some sort of fool, some sort of comedy, some sort of joke. I never asked her about it. I never asked if she took notice, but remembering her words, big noses don't get very far, she learned it from somewhere too. Sammy Davis Jr. tells this story about seeing Ruby one morning at the hotel bar after a night of gallivanting. Sammy Davis is wrecked and staggering. He's got this fat headache from the night before, but Ruby's no worse for wear. He's leaning against the bar, elegantly turned out and casually sipping a Ramos gin fizz. Sammy asks him, "How do you do it?" "Do what, Sammy?" "Night after night and still look as if the gods chose you." "Oh, Sammy, Sammy. Your job is being an entertainer. Mine is being a playboy." This was the morning that Sammy tells us that Ruby taught him 32 different ways to kiss a woman's hand. 32. Depending on the vibe and the intention. Sometimes you maintain eye contact on the way down, sometimes on the way up, sometimes the whole way. Personally, 32 ways to kiss a hand is ridiculous. But the scene that plays over and over again in my head is that on this day, while our two men are talking about 32 ways to kiss a woman's hand, everyone else they were with the night before, the entire Rat Pack, our two men's white wives, they're all getting ready for Kennedy's inauguration. But our two men here, they aren't invited. In closed rooms and private yachts, they are all friends. But in public, our two men of color here are erased. These characters are only seen when others want to see them.
Thank you. It wasn't until reading your book that I realized how commonplace that is. My mom would do that to me, the nose thing. And I started connecting other dots. Little things that are said, encouragement to get out of the sun, right? Like, why? We're in Miami. And it was never explicitly said why, but it was done. And I found myself as I was reading your book and, moving towards the final chapters, I'm not gonna lie, I was irritated. And I'm like, why is irritation so present in this body? And as my good meditation practice has taught me to connect with. And I'm like, this is why. Because I'm seeing these truths, these realities that were so passively, yet aggressively woven into our existence, into our culture, normalized. So yeah, thank you for helping me feel that and connect with that and for your words. You talk a bit about symbolic annihilation. Can you get into, that's another like aggressively sounding term, but that very much brings to life and again is part of what as things were building for me as a wave of emotions. It's because these are aggressive pieces, and I really appreciate the humor that you weave in throughout the way that you storytell. But these are tough things.
Symbolic annihilation is an aggressive term. I relate symbolic. I'll talk about another chapter in the book. My favorite chapter is called The American Dream. It's about my battle with student loans for going after the American dream. A dream that like says, go get the best education and then I will punish you for going after it. With loan payments more expensive than your rent. I believe we live in a world, systems are real. There are societal systems, and I believe we live in a world, the term also-rans? So in a horse race, there needs to be a winner, but you need the also-rans. You need other people to run. And I think this country is very good at creating also-rans. They don't want winners. They want you running. They want you running with the idea. What is that, James Baldwin? He says, we are born on a treadmill running with no shoes. while everyone else gets to pick if they're going to go on and take a lap. And so systemic annihilation to me is looking at these systems, all these systems that exist, and seeing how they don't want us to succeed. They don't want us to have liberation. They don't want us to be able to take up space, to use our voice, to own beautiful buildings and property, and that's not true of every human being on this planet. I think this space is really representative of what is possible. But I think overall it is really important to challenge these systems that have been designed for a certain person and are still run by a certain person, a specific sort of older white male, if we were to call that person. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to have my last question for Chris, but we're going to turn it over to you after. So please do think about how you'd like to engage, whether you're joining us online or in the room. As I was saying, you bring a lot of, and as we've heard, a lot of humor into your work, a lot of joy. But again, the reality is that this is really, really hard. The fact that these are still hidden stories and truths that are lived and that we're challenged by every day in our communities. This isn't a distant past, particularly when we're talking about Black and Brown communities. You speak a bit about some of the human losses that you face, but I think another part of the narrative is that, again, was building a lot of reflection and emotion for me was the different ways that we are constantly experiencing grief. And I'm curious, when you think of your meditation practice, you've written a few pieces for Tricycle, a Buddhist magazine. You speak about your practice and Buddhist meditation and Zen in the book. Can you bring us into how the role of Buddhism and meditation in your life, in moving through this, in your craft, any part of that?
Yeah, Buddhism's the best. Meditation changed my life. How I got there is funny. A really cute woman in college asked me if I meditated. I lied and said yes. She could have asked me anything. I would have been like, yes. And I maintained this lie for close to a year. And on my birthday, she said, I can see how hard you've been practicing. And she bought me a plane ticket to Massachusetts to attend a 7-day silent retreat. And that was my moment to say, no. And I was like, I can't wait. And so we went to this silent retreat together. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I made a fool of myself. And I have meditated every day since. And that was 15 years ago. Yeah. And yeah, meditation is been an ability to. I have a great teacher who asked me, why do you sit? Even chickens sit. That's what he says. Sitting is meditating. He says, why do you sit? Even chickens sit. What makes you different than a chicken? And I've come to an answer that I sit to meet myself. It's the same reason I make art. I try to create enough spaciousness to meet myself and to meet my heart, and to see how I'm feeling, to see my irritations, to ask big questions of myself. I care less about answers, and as Rilke says, maybe I'll ask a big enough question and maybe I'll live myself into an answer. And I think my practice of creating spaciousness and silence has allowed me to ask really scary questions and then maybe live myself into an answer, or maybe art myself into an answer. And that's my practice, and I love it very much. And my goal is to one day be so healed I don't have to make any art. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. If you can all join me in thanking Chris for sharing with us for bringing Brown Enough into this world. And we now would love to turn to you and hear your questions. And if you could please phrase it as a question, and we can move through as many as possible.
Yeah, so if you raise your hand, I'll come to you with the microphone. And if you're online, if you drop your question in the chat, I'll read it out loud so you can also be a part of it. I think I saw a hand by the bar.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a it's a big pleasure. My question is, when you speak, of course, you were born in Queens and you speak from an American perspective. I was born in Brazil, but your parents are both not American. Do you think that their experience is similar to yours in terms of, brownness? And
Yeah, so I think
the other part is, have you lived abroad, and do you have that experience?
I lived in Serbia for a year. That was weird. It was great at the time of my life. My parents, I talk about my parents a lot. Obsessed with both of them. I think they're dope. I got so lucky, y'all, because my parents had terrible parents. And so when they had kids, they said, we're going to be better than them. They said, we're going to allow our kids to experience their desires as safely as possible. And so when I said, I want to act, they were like, okay, and they just allowed me to do that. But my parents are victims of what I think many immigrants are, one of assimilation. A big part of my story is, why didn't my parents teach me Spanish? But they taught my sister, my older sister, because my sister got to spend summers in the DR with my grandmother. And I never got that opportunity because, the times had changed and they started losing. It's not losing parts of yourself, but you're just trying to survive. And my parents were working 2 jobs, and just to afford a home. And they each had a 9 to 5 and then a 7 to 3 a.m. And that was for years. And my sister basically raised me. And so I think assimilation is just a part of survival. And I think it happens to many people. And they didn't keep anything from me. They were just trying to give me the best opportunities that they, in whichever way they knew how. I think all parents are doing their absolute best with what they have. And so I thank them, and I know that they were in their own struggles. A big part of the book and the play is, when my dad was like, I'm gonna buy this house, I'm gonna sacrifice, I'm gonna do this thing, and his family said to him, what are you trying to be, white now? Which is really just a comment on power, right? It's like saying, what are you trying to have power now? Yes. Yeah, for sure. So this idea of, my parents dealt with a lot of assimilation and questions about culture. Bless you. I just got to take my mom back to Colombia. I flew us all back for my birthday. She hadn't been back in 20 years, and when she became an American citizen, at that time she had to give up her passport. And as soon as she got back, she went to the Colombian consulate to get her passport, and they want to move there. Yeah.
I have one online question, and then I'll get the question in the room. The online question is, as you've shared your book, have there been any surprises in how audiences have received your work?
God. As I share my book, have there been any surprises in how audience receive my work? Yes. So the surprise is, it's funny. There is an idea that we do everything for our childhood selves. Everything we do is for the inner child in us. When I wrote this book, I was never like, this is for my inner child. And lately, this book has become curriculum all around the country in high schools, in currently 5 different states, which is really cool. And I've been visiting all these high schools, and I've been meeting with all these youth, and it's so beautiful to watch them engage with this and to ask big questions of themselves and say, I didn't have the language to articulate this. And that feels really special because I did not have that population in mind, which is maybe why it works.
And we have a question from the bookstore side.
So we talked, or you talked about your art practice, your art making practice, and your meditation practice. I'm curious about your joy practice currently. What does that look like?
What a great question. Yeah, I'm going to take your words as a reminder to keep practicing. I get caught up in the work, like I do have joy in my life, but I don't make it. I think it should be conscious. It could be conscious more. I get a little caught up in the making of things and in the ambition, which that has been my new work, is like, I do think the more we heal, the less ambitious we are. But I try to remember joy. I try to have a conscious observation practice of beautiful things that bring me joy. And yeah, I will just take your words as a reminder. Thank you.
I do appreciate that you quote Ross Gay in your book, The Book of Delights, Master Around Joy.
So I think we have time for 2 more questions. I think we have an online question, and then we'll end with the question from the bar-ish area.
So the online question is, I'll read that out. What have you found is the most effective way to deal with rejection and accept failure in spaces you've worked hard to get into?
That's hard. That is a hard one. So I have soft skin, and people always said in Hollywood, your skin will toughen. It has not happened. I still take a no so hard, but that's why my art is so great, because I refuse to get hard. Like, I like staying soft. I like being moved. That's what makes me make art, is that I have the courage to be moved. I can only hope to move others if I have the willingness to be moved myself. And so I hate being said no to when I don't get a gig or something, or when a publisher's like, no. I can't stand it, but I keep going. My favorite definition of resilience is the ability to keep opening our hearts again and again and again. And I am wildly resilient in that sense. I will not stop opening my heart. I will keep opening my heart again and again and again.
Hi, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how it is that you ended up teaming up with Daniel Banks to develop the real James Bond was the Dominican.
Yeah, so I met Daniel in college. CalArts used to have this amazing thing where they would bring artists from all over the world in to do workshops with the students. I was a young acting student there, and Daniel came in, did a workshop, maybe 2 years in a row. That I'm not sure. And I one summer hit them up and I said, what are you doing? And they said, come to Hungary to do this thing. And so I went to Hungary to do hip hop theater workshops with them, with Roma, non-Roma youth. And so we had been in community, and then they started this ensemble of artists. And I said to Daniel, I have this play. And I have a ridiculous amount of pages. I don't know if it's a play. I have like 100 pages of writing. And for some reason, he decided to read 100 pages of writing and turn it and help me craft it into something that is really good. And that's kind of how it went down. And now we're here with you. It's not 100 pages. Any other questions? Or you're making us wrap up?
Yeah, I think if there's one more question, we'll take it. But otherwise, oh, okay, we have one final question up front. Okay.
Well, thank you for your work and all the ideas that you make us think about and that touch us in many different ways. I'm from Colombia originally. I've been in the U.S. since I was 14, and I've had the fortune to be able to travel back and forth between the U.S. and Colombia, and I love both countries. And I'm neither from here nor from there, somewhere in between, and richer because of that. I think the exploration that you do in your work is extremely valuable for so many people trying to find their place. And my suggestion for your consideration would be that you also reach out to the communities in Latin America, because this question of brownness, am I brown enough, or what am I, is extremely relevant in those countries as well. This is not just something in the U.S. This is worldwide, and you could say the same thing if you were from Hungary. You know how Slavic I am, or how Western European am I. It's really all the same human story of people integrating. Ultimately, all the same under the skin.
Amen. Everyone wants to be seen and everyone wants to belong. I believe that wholeheartedly. You know, we all want to walk into a space and know that we belong and know that we are loved and seen. And so, I love you. I see you. And I will be signing books. I got you. Thank you.
Thank you again to Chris and to our partners that made tonight possible, DNA Works, City Theater, and City of Asylum. Let's give it up one more time for Chris.
Nice black. That's my favorite color.